Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host as always. Make sure to keep watch for the Pop-Tarts. Don't want anybody getting offended by some Pop-Tart jokes today in case that happens. I'm excited to dive into the defensive side of things today with my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
I'm doing very well, but do we have to do this subject? Do we have to cover this topic? We could talk about something else. I think the Acolyte's on. I think we'd all rather watch that. And all its glory. No, I'm totally joking. I watch it at this point as I'm a completionist, so I will finish that one. But yes, we're talking about the defense, and it is definitely something. If you think the offense is, solid but not great, the defense is a little worse off than that. The good news is it's expected. It's not like there's several, draft picks on here that are terrible. It's more just there's not a lot of talent right now. And that's a big old Telesco and Staley. Thank you.
Yeah. One final send off from the previous regime. Going from the House of Dragon dialogue to the Acolyte dialogue is like one of the biggest downgrades imaginable. So should be fun. Like Tyler mentioned, we're going to do the tiering of the defense. I think yesterday people were probably really interested to see like where we would have the wide receivers and where we had Slater and where we had Herbert. Like there's very clear headliners and there's some interesting questions here, but I don't know how many like interesting debates we're going to have tonight. We'll do our best, obviously, to make it fun and it should be a great conversation. But sorting through the defense was, I feel like, much easier outside of like a player or two, depending on how you wanted to define them. Yeah. So it should be a lot of fun doing the defense. Quick shout out as well to the Bootleg Football guys. Brett and EJ Snyder did their Chargers episode today. We've had them on the show. They're great. They do such great work, such detailed work on every single team. And obviously Brett working with the Chargers, living in LA, he's got a unique, national lens when it comes to the Chargers. And so definitely wanted to give a quick shout out to them on Chargers Day. If you're not subscribed, if you haven't checked it out, I definitely encourage you to go do that. They are, in my opinion, one of the most detailed podcasts out there. And if you're looking for a national podcast talking about the Chargers that has some nuance to it, that is the right place to go, in my opinion.
Yeah, great stuff as always. They do tremendous work. I can't say that I've checked out all their series. I don't care about the Panthers or the Buccaneers
right
that much. But, some other AFC teams, AFC West teams, of course. And then, the Chargers, a very good, hopeful perspective, but also realistic one for a lot of these teams. What can you find in some of these teams? What's the good in them? What's the positive? And then, what are they really about? So I always like their takes. They are generally very level-headed.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a nice balance on the defense in particular, because today, I don't know how positive this episode is going to be. But I think we all believe in Jesse Minter's ability to be able to maximize the roster. And then it seemed like the Bootleg guys kind of agree with us where next year they're going to have a lot more resources to be able to pour into the defense and give Jesse Minter the kind of roster that he deserves. Although if you're hoping for Jesse Minter to be around long, you might want to skip that part of the conversation from the Bootleg Football guys. But we'll see what happens there. Before we get started, obviously want to tell you guys to make sure like, subscribe, comment, leave us a rating or review. All that stuff really does help continue to grow the show. We've had a great time jumping back in after our break, and we appreciate all the positive comments. Feedback has been fun, so we've been able to get back into the swing of things rather smoothly, I would say. All right, Tyler, let's jump into the tiers here. If you missed yesterday's show, we've separated this into the following tiers. We have the all-pro, all-pro worthy kind of tier, which is being labeled as the top 4 tier. You have the Pro Bowl tier. You have a solid starter with upside, somebody that could potentially, jump into a Pro Bowl kind of level player. You have an average starter. You have a rotational player. You have a firmly backup player. Yesterday, that was like Easton Stick, for example. And then you have the roster bubble, which are guys we spent a lot of time talking about last week. So the defense has more players on it than the offense because there's just a lot more uncertainty. So we'll jump into some things here. And if you can see the pictures, Tyler does have a few fun ones. Like I see Tormund from Game of Thrones, and I see the Gatorade bottle, which I assume is Scott Matlock. And
who's going to tell you to stay hydrated?
Oh, Denzel Perryman. Okay.
There you go.
Good.
Keep talking while I find a picture of Tony Jefferson, because I definitely did not forget him.
Oh, yeah. You don't have to redo the whole tier, do you?
No, I don't think so. I think I just got to add this download right here. Tony Jefferson, and bada bing, bada boom. All right, he's on there. Nothing. You didn't see anything.
Yeah, that's live television, folks. For you folks. Yeah. Right on cue, Dennis Yum asking about Tony Jefferson. So we talked a bit about him on the roster bubble episode, but I'm not sure how much we'll talk about him today. So I think this Chargers roster is one that is ripe to be maximized, but we'll see, what kind of players fit where. So let's start with the roster bubble, guys. Tyler, I feel like that's the easiest place for us to start. So you can go ahead and pencil in, the Gerard Clarks and the CJ Okoyes and I see.
Okay, so I have. I'm just going in order of what I'm looking at. So Andrew Farmer. Let me know if you want me to change anything.
Yep.
Akeem Dent. I think all the UDFAs. I'll come back to JT Woods.
That's fair. Is that Tariq still in between Morgan and Eboigbe?
No, that is AJ Finley.
Oh, okay.
Where was I? Okay, so Gerard Clark, Ty Shelby, 58. Is that Hollins? Oh, it's Hollins. Roster bubble?
Yeah. Is he on the roster?
He's on the ESPN depth chart.
Okay, that's fair.
So whatever. He's at least on the bubble. If he's not on a roster, oops. So Jalen Phillips, the safety from Clemson.
Is the one next to Cam Hart, is that Puna? The big guy?
The big guy next to Cam Hart. Oh, first of all, Thomas Harper. Where's my golden boomer?
It's Fulton, and then I think that's still, and then Cam Hart, and then a bigger guy. I assume that's Puna.
Yeah, that's Puna Ford here.
Okay.
I didn't put CJ Okoye on here.
That's fine.
So I think we're good for the roster bubble. Oh, sorry. Let's get into it then. JT Woods. He'll maybe make this team, but I think you and I see him pretty similar standing as any of the UDFAs who, if they make any kind of play, can just have his spot.
Yeah, I would say Akeem Dent and JT Woods have the same chance of making the roster at this point in time. So
okay, JT Woods roster bubble.
Yep.
Okay, that sorts that. Which now leads me to AJ Finley. You and I believe he's more so of a lock, if not a lock, at least because of special teams. Technically, if he's the third safety, he could start in a pinch because he literally has to. But he's also firmly a backup if we're just talking defense.
Yeah, I'm cool with AJ Finley in firmly a backup category.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I feel like if he were on other teams, I don't think he would be a rotational player, like solidified.
Yeah.
So I think he's firmly in the backup category. I think also in that tier, you could put Nick Niemann.
Yeah. So
even though I might
back up.
I feel a little bit better about him.
Me too.
But I just like on this team, I feel like they would. I don't know if he has like a super good chance of being linebacker 3.
No, I don't think so. Previous regime, maybe. Why can I not find Nick Niemann? Is this 31 right here? That's 32.
Pictures are. I can't see all of the pictures. Is he on there? I don't think he's on there then.
How's he not on there? He's my guy.
Who's in between Bud and Denzel Perryman? Is that Rumpf?
Yeah, that's Rumpf.
Okay. Well, we said Rumpf is on the roster bubble, so you can put him on the roster bubble.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. Okay, Rumpf roster bubble.
Who's the one in between Fox and Perryman that you said?
That's Alohi.
That's Alohi. Okay.
Which probably a fun conversation. Okay, so if Neiman was firmly a backup, then that's also Dan Henley.
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
And then
probably Troy
Dye then. So firmly a backup.
Yep.
Technically, he would be the starter in a pinch, but he's firmly a backup. I don't see him starting?
Uh, I will say briefly about Dan. I think if we're going to assume that a lot of these players develop, I think we could make an argument for Dayon to be in category D, up a tier. Like I don't know how
Yeah.
much more Troy Dye and Nick Neiman are actually going to develop from like core special teamer to start in a pinch. But if there was going to be a backup linebacker that was going to take a step into that tier, I think that is Dayon, for what it's
Okay.
worth.
Yeah. Okay. I don't mind that. Sure.
Okay.
That sounds fine to me. It has to be somebody.
Yeah.
So that's fine if it's Dayon. I can work with that.
Yeah, even if he's not the clear-cut linebacker 3 right now, I think there's a greater chance of him becoming that guy throughout the season.
Yeah. Okay. I can get behind that. Let's continue with some of these guys. So Scott Matlock here is a Tormund Giantsbane. I mean, technically all these D tackles will rotate, as are the 4 edge rushers, but I don't see him as the starter or a true rotation player. So
I think Matlock is a bubble player, but like you mentioned when we were doing the bubble thing, like Jim Harbaugh outright mentioned him as a leader of the football team. Like,
right.
I think the team is much higher on him than I am. So I think you probably got to put him in the backup tier at minimum.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. The way it works for me with some of these tiers is like, okay, if he's there, then where's Aboigbe, their draft pick? So
yeah,
do we feel? I mean, I think Aboigbe could flat out end up starting in some situations. As one of the first 2 guys out, no, but as the 3rd guy, potentially.
I'm 100% more comfortable playing Aboigbe than I am Matlock. I think Aboigbe, I don't agree with the Harbaugh comment if they had like a 2nd round grade on him. That was like a little rich for me, but like 3rd round grade, absolutely. I think that was definitely a guy I was comfortable with, like a late day 2 grade. Whereas Matlock, we watched him after the fact, and he would have been firmly like late day 3 for me. So Aboigbe and his run defense, I think definitely could be in the same category as Dayon, maybe, but I think that might be a little rich just given his role uncertainty.
I wonder how far along they think he's going to be. Because they did, I mean, Elston did mention what he has to work on. I mean, as any day 3 pick would. I'm okay putting him in category D because he should be rotating more heavily. It's not like there's 3 first round picks ahead of him. So
yeah, I'm comfortable if we're putting Dayon in that category. I think we can put Aboigbe in that category as well.
Cool. Do you want to continue with defensive tackle with Poona Ford, Morgan Fox?
Yeah, I think Poona, I'm comfortable in the average starter category.
I agree.
Certainly not a rotational piece. Upside, like we talked about yesterday, there's so many good defensive tackles.
Right.
It's tough for me to put him in that B category, but I think his ability as a run defender, they're going to play him in his more natural position as a nose tackle. I think they'll get him back on track to what he has been previously. So average starter feels right to me.
Definitely.
I think the pass rush efficiency numbers say Morgan Fox should be a solid starter with upside, but it's the run defense part of that conversation that's maybe holding me back a bit more from putting him like surefire in that category.
I think what ends up, so I agree with you on Poona Ford. What ends up moving Morgan Fox just to average starter for me is that while I do think is a very good pass rusher, there were 29 defensive tackles with 40 pressures last season. It's just such a great position these days with great talent that if we're assuming solid starters, someone who can kind of like knock on the door of top 10, who's in that 11 to 16 range, I don't think that's Morgan Fox. So he's more average starter with upside. We don't have that category. So to me, I do think because of the run defense, he's more in the average starter territory. But we do feel very good about his upside. It's just for the categories, it's more average starter.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I think that's the right way to look at that.
Okay.
Even though like his pass rush numbers are so good from a per play basis, like there's 3 or 4 defensive tackles these days that are like hovering around 100
Yes.
pressures these
Right.
days. So it's just kind of crazy.
Yeah, I think Morgan Fox had 3 run stops too, something single digits. And then you look at the best guys, they have 50, 45. It's just the numbers some of these guys are putting up are insane. Well, Anthony says the Chargers are the rumor they want to trade for Jonathan Allen. I think that was the 3rd year in a row someone has started that rumor. So
yeah, it's not a rumor. It was a suggestion from somebody saying like, so Ben Stadig from The Athletic posted that he did an article a few weeks ago that if things go poorly, the Washington Commanders could try to trade him. And somebody else posted an article linking that article and was like, oh, the Chargers need a defensive tackle. They should trade for him. It's not a rumor. It's a suggestion piece from a group of writers that really don't know what they're talking about if you've read their other articles.
Bummer. Yeah, I'm all for it. If they decide to go that way, we've talked about this. I'm sure because of the Johnny Newton selection, there's going to be discussion about who they can trade. They did just trade away multiple players from their defensive line last year, but different regime.
Yeah.
I don't see why they'd trade him.
Yeah.
I even think Brandon Thorne did the same draft stuff before defensive line with Carl Lawson and I can't remember the other individual. And I think Jonathan Allen was one of the first like 6 or 7 guys that were taken.
Yeah.
So I get it if they want to, blow the team up and focus on offense or whatever at some point, I guess. But I wouldn't move on from him.
No, if you're the Commanders, like, why would you? I mean, they did draft Johnny Newton. Couldn't think of his name there for a second.
Right.
So but he's like dealing with foot surgery. So
exactly.
But like, could they trade him down the road? Sure. Should the Chargers be interested? 100% yes.
Mm-hmm.
This same article source, whatever you want to call them, also wrote today like that the Chargers should go sign Deion Jones, who hasn't been like a good linebacker in like 7 years. So it's not LAFB. LAFB shares stuff, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But the people who wrote the actual article just kind of shitpost all the time, and yeah.
The Chargers would never sign someone who hasn't been a starter and good for 5 to 6 or 7 years. They would never do that. Oh, by the way, do you want to get to Tony Jefferson's rank?
Nice transition. Nicely done. Nicely done. But yes, if Jonathan Allen became available for trade, I am 100% interested. I think that's the exact same kind of, trade piece that we have been talking about on the show for mid-season trade acquisitions. And that'd be a fantastic one.
Yeah. Also, we didn't get to Otito yet. Are we saying kind of same category as Matlock, or I do feel better about Otito.
I feel better about Otito than Matlock for sure, but I don't know if I feel like putting him in that same category as Eboigbe.
Okay.
I don't know. That was one of the tougher ones for me because he is a backup, and I don't know if I feel good about him as a backup. I don't know how I feel about him as a potential starter in a pinch.
Right. Okay.
So I think that conflict. Yeah, I think that conflict means he's a backup.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that all the defensive tackles?
I believe it is. So we have corner, safeties, linebackers, and edge rushers.
Okay, we could do the rest of the. Well, we could do the Jefferson and Jasir Taylor category.
Okay,
there at the end. I feel like Tony Jefferson should be in the Ross bubble tier because we can't firmly say that he is a backup.
Mm-hmm.
And like he did retire, like the rest of the league was not super interested in him either.
Right.
So I feel like we have to put him in the roster bubble category.
I think so. Do we want to have a 4th safety? Well, no, I guess because then the roster bubble comes down to one of Jefferson, Woods, or these UDFAs. So everyone's in the roster bubble, and one of them becomes that backup. But for now, roster bubble. Okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Dean Leonard, I think also we can put in firmly a backup, even if I'm really excited to see what year 3 looks like for him.
Yeah.
I can't really see him starting this year.
Yeah, barring injury.
You
want to talk about Jaw Taylor?
Yeah, so that's what I was trying to get to with Ja and Tarib Still. There's a lot of Tarib Still talk after minicamp. We were both very skeptical of the draft pick after watching him. Does the minicamp hype change things at all for you regarding Tarib Still and what his classification might be?
No, it really doesn't. I think we've got to at least see it in training camp, to feel a little bit better about that. But even with someone like Dean Leonard, who has had one very good training camp and then another really good training camp, we still have him here as firmly a backup.
Yeah.
So that's how much the training camp stuff really moves the needle for me. I would be more comfortable putting Dean Leonard in rotation, could start in a pinch, than putting, Tarheeb in that category. So he's definitely making the roster, but I think someone is going to start. It's currently Jaw Taylor based on the reps. So I would want to put Tarheeb still in firmly a backup, but training camp could very well change that.
Oh man. I know one of them technically we have to put as a starter, but I just feel like one of the things we initially put in the description is like, oh, they would start in a handful of other teams or wouldn't. Yeah. How many teams are Tarheeb Still and Jasir Taylor actually starting nickels on?
The Raiders.
The 49ers, because they have Brandon Staley. So I kind of just feel like by default we have to put them in rotational piece until we see how that pans out. But at the same time, that feels wrong to me based off of like their evaluations. Like, I don't think those players individually are guys who I am comfortable with starting with in a pinch.
Yeah.
Whereas technically they are. So
the way I kind of parse this one out, if I'm picking Jaw Taylor as the starter heading into the season, I think that because they can easily bring in Derwin James or Alohi Gilman or do whatever they got to do to put a different person in the slot, because it doesn't necessarily have to be him all the time. I kind of see Jaw Taylor as that D category as rotation player, and then I would move Tarheeb still to firmly a backup.
Yeah. For what it's worth, Brett Coleman believes that Tarheeb's tackling ability and physicality gives him an edge there. I think that's kind of overstated because Jasir can tackle and he is physical as well. It's not like Jasir is, Asante out on an island out there, but the first team reps in minicamp were majorly held by Jasir Taylor. And so I think until that changes, I would put Jasir in rotational and Tarheeb in firmly a backup.
Yeah, that's fair. I absolutely think that's the case. And it seems like with the Chargers and then from other things we've heard, like Tarheeb still was viewed as a nickel, like a slot corner type.
Yeah.
No one was really projecting him as an outside type. So yeah, firmly a backup sounds good to me.
Man, I've got a really bad glare on my face right now. So apologies for that.
It's okay.
Okay. I still see Cam Hart in there and Bud Dupree, who we've got to sort out from a backup standpoint. Bud Dupree, I think you could put him in rotational could start in a pinch category. I think average starter is past him at this point in time.
Yeah.
Cam Hart, what did you make of Cam Hart?
Because of the way the roster has kind of gone out so far, and it seems like they had their two outside guys locked in, I had Cam Hart just as firmly a backup. Could that change? Sure. But they even took Tarheeb still over Cam Hart. They waited for Cam Hart, which could have been an injury thing or something. So I see him as firmly a backup, but that doesn't mean that I don't see somewhere down the line, if not during the season, that he gets out there because one of the two guys aren't really holding up.
Yeah. I think there is a chance that Dean Leonard or Cam Hart emerge throughout the season as a starter. Maybe that's Dean because he's been in the NFL. He's had the experience. We've seen him start a few games. But I think both of those guys probably are firmly in a backup category right now.
Yeah. So Cam Hart to firmly a backup. Now we still have for corners Zont and Kristian Fulton, which was Probably the toughest two for me.
Yeah. Let's start with the positive there. I went back and looked at a lot of these numbers for both of these players, trying to figure out where to start this conversation. And, like I've looked at the numbers several times. I've watched the tape of both players from last season. And I think Asante's season in 2023 was probably a little bit better than I remember it being during the season as well as like after the season. So just looking at Asante first, if you look at his numbers, he actually had the 19th highest coverage grade. This is out of 83 qualified corners. So 19 out of 83, that puts him, borderline top 20, depending on how you look at that. He did allow the 10th most yards, but he was targeted more than every corner in the league except for like 3. So he had 85 targets on the season. So he was getting a lot of targets funneled his way, to his credit. He did also have the 6th most forced incompletions with 14. He was tied for 15th in forced incompletion percentage with 17%. He had 2 interceptions, and he was 48th in passer rating targeted. So the yards allowed it's a tough look, at the same time, how much does that quantify scheme, responsibility, what he's being asked to do as the kind of quote unquote cornerback 2 on this team? But he makes plays on the football, man. Like this is a guy who still has that part of his game that we loved, from him coming out of Florida State. And it's still shown up. Like his forcing completion percentage has really maintained a really solid level throughout the course of his entire career. There are certainly some warts to his game, especially as a run defender. But I would classify Asante in almost a similar way I would look at Mike Williams, where Mike Williams is a high-end wide receiver 2, but I don't think he can really get into that wide receiver 1 range. And it's the same kind of thing with Asante. I think on the majority of NFL teams, he's probably a cornerback 2, a good cornerback 2, who is capped. His ceiling is capped. Like he's never going to be a true Sauce Gardner, Patrick Surtain type of cornerback 1. But I do think the numbers for the first 3 years of his career, the film, show a cornerback 2 who is a reliable, solid cornerback 2, more so than maybe some fans, including myself, have kind of talked about him.
Yeah, this one was tricky for me. This almost reminds me of the Morgan Fox conversation in the sense that we have something that's very good, that they're very good at and known for, and then what they're not good at. You talked about the passes broken up. 20 passes broken up the last 2 seasons is obviously no joke. The forced incompletions, all that's what he's known for. We see it. I think that's what fans love the most.
Yeah.
And he's awesome at that. What he's able to create is fantastic. It's the stuff against the run that is obviously an issue,
Right.
Against the run, 5th worst missed tackle rate, 6th worst run stop rate, only 3 tackles and 438 run defense snaps, which is the worst in the NFL last season for all the starters. So it really comes down to how much emphasis do we place on the upside of what he does in coverage versus the downside of what he has as a run defender.
Right.
And then also, we actually haven't even mentioned this yet, the whole Jesse Minter effect and the new defense and the new defensive staff. Do we believe that Asante Samuel Jr. is someone that benefits from this staff? Or do we go back to what we talked about pre-draft and post-draft about, do we even think Asante Samuel Jr. fits this scheme and fits what they want out of their corners overall? So it's a tricky one for sure. I ended up with Asante Samuel Jr. in average starter due to the fact that I am not super pumped on the run defense. And if we're putting Morgan Fox in average starter, I'm worried about Asante Samuel Jr. as his own run defender. And if you only are a Gus Edwards runner or a Morgan Fox pass rusher, but you can't do the other thing, can we move you out of average starter? So he kind of falls into the average starter with upside category if we had one. I ultimately ended up with him as an average starter, though.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm on the same page there. And some people will say like, oh, like you're making too much of the run defense, like cornerbacks aren't paid to play the run. And it's like, yes, but at the same time, you have to be at least able and willing to do it. And Asante, when he's closer to the box, he will stick his nose in and he will tackle. but in terms of like setting the edge for corners, it's different than setting the edge for edge rushers.
Sure.
You kind of have to be the last man on the island, and you have to be very willing to take on blockers. You have to be willing to close that space, and he's just not. And so it's a very real thing. Like Doug Peterson actively like went at him in several different occasions to design his run game to get Asante in space and try and tackle a running back in space, and he couldn't and wouldn't do it. So it's a real thing that other teams are scheming up. So I think he has a lot of good qualities that we liked at Florida State. It just hasn't necessarily come together full circle yet. You know, it can that happen in the new defense? Can that happen with Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter? I think it could, but until we see a greater commitment to play the run, I think we do have to put him in the average starter category. So I was fine with that. Even if you're just isolating him as a cover corner, like he's probably top 20, and I think that's fine. I think that's good. Like he's a second round pick. It's not like we're talking about somebody they drafted in the top 5. So I think he can have a long career in the NFL as a solid, reliable cornerback too. It's just maybe not the cornerback one that we were all hoping to, you know, when he was a rookie and intercepting passes right away and things like that. But for him to maintain a really strong level of pass breakups, forcing completions, coverage grade, that does indicate that he is a solid average starter, maybe a little bit more if he can fix the run defense, though, for sure.
Right. It'd also be receiver is something I feel like we can just assign, like you can be your starter. DB, it's with corner, it's tricky because you can have a CB1 who has a much more difficult responsibility than someone like a CB2. So maybe he's a CB2 with upside, but maybe an average CB1.
Yeah.
Which he will be this year, it seems.
Yeah. Okay. The other side of this coin is Kristian Fulton, who I understand why they signed him. I think it's a worthy dart throw for where the Chargers are at. I'm not saying it was a bad signing. That being said, the numbers for Kristian Fulton in 2023 were much rougher than I remember them being after they signed him. So again, 83 qualified corners. Kristian Fulton was 79th in coverage grade. He was not targeted as much as Asante Samuel Jr. He did allow more yards per reception, but in total, it was the 34th most yards allowed on 51 targets. He was 73rd out of 83 in forced incompletions with just 4. He had 68th in forced incompletion percentage, which was 8%. And he had the 3rd worst passer rating when targeted. So the numbers are not great. It was not an ideal situation, according to him, in Tennessee. I think they played a lot more man coverage than he was probably hoping they would have this past season in their new kind of scheme change-ish thing that they were trying to do. So they're definitely betting on him being the guy he was in 2021 and 2022 and not in 2023.
Right.
But for me, I think that merits putting him in the rotational player starter in a pinch category, even though he probably is the starter.
Yeah, this was a tricky one because the play and the numbers and having to leave one team to go to another more so indicates D, right? Rotation player could start in a pinch, like who he is. And if we're looking at this, not just on the Chargers, but just looking at 32 teams, yeah, he on many teams would be a rotation player, could start in a pinch. We thought they'd sign another corner. They still could. We thought they would, maybe draft a corner earlier. We talked about corner in round 1. They didn't. Totally fine. So it's tricky with Kristian Fulton, who is now, so far, the de facto starter and has been dominating snaps opposite Asante Samuel Jr. in camp. So they're hoping he's at least an average starter, which average starter would be an increase in play based on his numbers and stuff from last season.
Yeah.
It's tricky for me. This is why it's a little bit tougher with categories, because he does not belong in the same category as Asante Samuel Jr., especially because we put him in average starter. He's a tier below him. Even if his play is raised up a little bit, I still think Zont is better overall. So based on our tiers, he ends up being a rotation player, could start in a pinch league-wide, but on the Chargers, he's a starter. So I don't mind putting him in the D category, even though on the Chargers, he's going to start, it looks like, this year.
Yeah, I'm looking at our lads, just like the starters at cornerback. I think, looking at who he is, his draft status, the kind of talent he does have, I think he would be in a similar standing as he is on the Chargers on 6, 7, maybe 8 other teams. Cornerback looking at this is definitely in a bit of a tougher spot than otherwise people might think. The Steelers are currently slated to start Dante Jackson. I think Kristian Fulton could be a better player than that. The Colts are currently slated to start Juju Brents and Jalen Jones. Maybe there's a chance there. The Jaguars are currently slated to start 35-year-old Ronald Darby. I think Fulton's a better player than Ronald Darby is right now. The Raiders are starting Jacorian Bennett this year. I don't know. I think there's a chance that Fulton starts over him. The Commanders are starting Benjamin St-Juste and Michael Davis. That's kind of rough. So there's a handful of other teams that I think Fulton could still start on, but I think this is really a make or break year for him. If he has another bad year, like, this is probably it. If he has a great season, proves that he can be that player again, then he'll stick around in the league for a little bit more, especially with his draft status. But if he's bad in this specific system with this kind of supporting cast around him, it's probably it. So it is a make or break year for him. I'm putting him in the rotational category just because I don't fully trust him as an average starter just yet.
Yeah, I agree. And nor is he being paid like an average starter. I don't know what average starter corner money is, but getting basically the vet minimum or slightly above it, whatever he got, certainly doesn't indicate that the league feels he's an average starter.
Yeah. All right. We did most of the backups, rotational players, role players. These are, I would say, the core pieces of the Chargers defense with Alohi Gilman, Derwin James, Junior Colson, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Tuli Tuipulotu, and Denzel Perryman probably as well, even though at this stage of his career. Where do you want to start with that group of players, Tyler?
We can finish the linebacker room here. Okay. Minus McNeeman. My bad. Love you, buddy. But yes, we have Denzel Perryman and Junior Colson left. I feel Denzel's probably just an average starter. Like, not. I don't expect anything spectacular. I don't expect anything to be terrible either. I think he's exactly what they're bringing him in for. I think average starter is completely fine if that works with you.
Yeah, that's 100% fine with me. I think at his best, maybe you can make an argument for him to be in the B category, but right now he's basically a run defender, pass rusher. Yeah. He's not really going to give you a ton in coverage. But his value to the Chargers right now is that he is a veteran presence who can mentor Junior Colson, who can give him all of the answers to the test and be able to, be that communicator. Even though Junior knows the defense, like, Denzel can call the defense this year. He doesn't have to be on Junior's plate. That's really the main value for him. And I think he is a reliable, solid starting caliber linebacker.
Yeah, I agree. So Junior Colson. I placed Perryman. Would you like to place Colson? You want to hear what I think?
I'll hear what you think first, because I'm very, very bullish on him, and I don't know if I want to.
Well, then we're on the same page, baby.
Okay, good. Yes.
Okay, so you had him in the B category, or did you have him?
I did have him in the B category. Yes.
Yeah, I just think, I don't know how great the linebacker position is. I was looking at like All Pro and the Pro Bowlers last year. Good players, mostly older players.
Yeah.
Or players are on their second contracts. Junior Colson is just the perfect situation. You saw our reaction to the selection. Pro Bowl's tough. Being a top 10 linebacker, that's very tough for a third round pick who, again, we're assuming he's starting, but technically we don't know officially. But yeah, I think starter with upside sounds great. I think because of the scheme, because of the familiarity, I think he'll be one of the bright spots in what could be a very rough middle to back half of this defense.
Yeah. So just looking at the landscape of the league, we can start there. I think you unquestionably have three great linebackers at the top in Fred Warner, Roquan Smith, and Quincy Williams, I would say, is in that conversation as well. Maybe, oh my gosh, what's his name from Buffalo? CJ, or not CJ Milano. Yeah, Milano. That category I think is pretty set in stone. Then you have guys like Demario Davis, who's been great.
Yeah.
But he's older. You obviously have Levante David, same kind of thing.
Yeah.
CJ Mosley, same kind of deal.
Queen.
Patrick Queen, depending how you feel about him. I'm not crazy about him, but he probably is in the top 10.
Yeah.
The top 10 of the linebacker unit is 100% up in the air outside of like the top 5, I would say. So Junior Colson, we love the fit. Obviously, he knows the defense, the physical standpoint of things, the mental standpoint of things. It's perfect for him to be able to come in and just challenge for the top 15, top 10 of this position. Is that us probably sipping the Kool-Aid a little bit on the draft evaluation? Maybe. Linebacker is a tougher position to adjust, but he has all the answers to the test right now. He knows the defense already. He knows what to look for. He knows what kind of, fire zone pressure looks that Jesse Minter is going to call. We just really believe in Junior Colson, and I think it's just the perfect storm for him to come into this defense, be able to have the position landscape the way that it is, where we're kind of in a weird transition right now where the NFL is kind of pivoting towards bigger linebackers again. We still have a lot of smaller linebackers in the NFL. There's not really a solidified third tier of linebackers. So I absolutely think that putting him in the B tier is fair at this point in time, given how we feel about him, his fit in the defense, and the position overall.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad we're talking about at the NFL landscape level, because I had Ladd McConkey ranked higher than him. Colson was LB1 for me, McConkey wide receiver 5. But the wide receiver landscape is so young and so talented.
Yeah.
You mentioned all the linebackers. How many of them have 2 more years in them? How many of them are like, this is their last year? A lot of these expiring contracts, older players. Colson is like part of that next group.
Yeah.
And frankly, the linebacker, they have not been the NFL, or excuse me, college has not been putting out great linebacker prospects either. No. So yeah, I see Colson fitting in here. He doesn't even have to be great to be in this 11 to 16 range. He could be pretty good. And I think he could be at least in the back half of that.
Yeah. If you look at most teams in the NFL these days, they have very similar linebacker situations to what the Chargers had last year, where it's like, we have this first round pick from a few years ago. He's fine. And then let's just go pay this veteran who we know can like be serviceable, and then we're good. Like that's the bulk of the NFL. Linebacker is, it's not been paid like the top tiers, but if you have an elite linebacker, it's such a big advantage over every other team because it can quite literally like change your defense. I mean, we even saw the drop off from going from Drew Tranquil to Eric Hendricks, and Drew Tranquil is like fine. Like he's a good NFL linebacker. He's not Fred Warner. He's not Roquan Smith.
No.
So it gives you such a big advantage if you can get one of those guys. And I think it's pretty clear we believe that Junior Colson can become one of those guys down the road.
Yeah. Love it. Cool. On the same page there.
Okay, let's do we'll do Thule next year. That feels right. I think at minimum he's an average starter because this is one of the best run defending edge rushers in the NFL. He was just behind Khalil in total run stop percentage. And, one of the things I did after all the draft stuff, the first thing I wanted to do was go back and see how Thule finished the season, because I kind of stopped watching the film after like week 14, when basically like the Packers game on, I just like was not watching it anymore. So I went back, man, and Thule, I think the pass rush slowed down a little bit, certainly. But at the same time, this was a guy who was playing core for special teams. He was playing a starter role that he wasn't like destined to play from the start of the season. But him as a run defender was so consistent, and he was so dominant in that regard. So for me, like, we can have a conversation about how much pass rush upside I think he really has, but because of his run defense, because of his motor, I think he's an average starter category at minimum.
I agree. It's tricky because he's not the starter.
He's not technically a starter.
This team. So it kind of depends on how we feel about him and the leap he could take. Should he take a step forward this year? All he did was exercise in the offseason. because he really did not know what else to do.
He went to like Disneyland one weekend and that was like it.
Yeah, he went to San Francisco and was like, "Nah, I'm just gonna go work out. I'm just gonna go work out."
I love it so much. He's just like, I didn't
Yeah.
want to go anywhere.
for that alone, no, truly believe if Joey Bosa was let go this year, that Tuli starts and we put him in the B category. Given that's how I feel about him, I don't mind putting him in solid starter with upside, even though he's not starting. I do believe, like, he was a rookie who was a solid starter with upside.
Yeah.
And I think that you don't see games like that from just average starter. He's someone who on some days was the best player on the team on either side of the football. So I don't mind putting him in solid starter with upside, even though we'll not really see that till next year or week 2 if Joey gets hurt.
Knock on wood. Yeah, Noah and Zach pointing out too. He just turned 21. Like, this is crazy. Like, Tuli doing the things that he did, and we had the Bootleg Football guys on during the season last year because that's where the season went. Where we just like, we're not talking about the team. Let's talk about Tuli all season long. And then let's get the Bootleg guys on here. Dropping into coverage and just like, it was just completely blown away. Like, I liked Tuli. I was optimistic about him, but he vastly exceeded any kind of expectations that I had as a rookie. I agree. I would put him as a solid starter with upside from his performance. And I think, on the bulk of NFL teams, this is a guy who would be, a third edge rusher, if not a starter, somebody who can come in and give you such a high floor. But if he figures out the pass rush, like really the sky is the limit here because of his athleticism, his power profile is just like, it was kind of insane to me watching his tape again, because he's doing all the run defense stuff. Like, there are some run defenders who, they're always running to that side. He's going up against the tight ends. Like, no. Like, this guy is going up against Colton Miller and getting a run stop. This guy is going up against Spencer Brown. This guy is going up against Deion Dawkins. He's setting the edge. He's cutting off the backside. He's taking on double teams. Like, he's such a good run defender. And the pressure numbers from a per play status are not like great, but when he was the third edge rusher, the per play stats were fantastic. And I think, as he gets, accustomed to the NFL, I think he'll become much more efficient as a pass rusher. So I'm more than okay with this conversation.
Cool. Sounds good. All right. So now that means we got a little bit of good positivity here. Where did you end up with Joey Bosa? Because I think every year that we could have been doing this, you could even argue he's the S tier, but definitely in that A tier. But it's a relentless bit of injuries.
Yeah.
So now we're trying to weigh, how good is he going to be? How healthy is he going to be? Some people are questioning, how motivated is he going to be?
Yeah.
And then given the influx of new edge rushers, where does he now stand? Because there are a very good set of edge rushers in the league now too. So how did you work this one? Or should I say, do you want to start with Khalil and then place Joey after? Or do you want to just go for it with Joey?
I think we can start with Joey here. Excuse me. I think if Joey stays healthy, he is a Pro Bowl player.
Oh, yeah.
But it's such a big if at this point because he's had the tricep, the groin, the concussions, everything, the calf, I think there was against the Saints back in 2020. There's so many injuries. The foot, obviously, that ended his past season. I can't put him as a surefire Pro Bowler when I don't know with 100% confidence if he can play more than 14 games. So for me, this is a health question. And I know the fan base is really low on Joey Bosa. Like, we're diagnosing his quotes on the cafeteria workers. Like, it's just ridiculous. The guy, when he is healthy and on the field, is, in my opinion, easily one of the 10 best edge rushers in the league. Easily. And he showed that last year. There were questions about him playing like run defense. When he was on the field, he was right there neck and neck with Khalil as a run defender last year. It's just the health. Anything else to me is nonsense. If you want to talk to me about the health, I can understand it. Anything else, complete nonsense in my opinion. but the health is a legit concern. So for that, I put him
Okay.
in the B category just because I don't know if I can get 15 games out of Joey Bosa.
Right. That's totally fair. That's where I ended up having him too. So no arguments there. It's tough. If he's healthy, easy Pro Bowl type player, top 10 kind of player, such a dual threat kind of player. Could very well happen, but I think B is perfectly fine for him. And with that said, I have Khalil Mack higher as a top 10 kind of edge rusher.
Yeah.
I don't know how many more years that's going to last, but to me, what he did last year was insane. And frankly, he belongs up there just for the leadership and the health alone. You talk about Joey Bosa's health, Khalil being as much older as he is, past his 30s, a couple
He's like 2 years older than me.
So old, you 30-year-olds. That's me next year. But Khalil's what he's doing is fantastic. So I think that even if we start to see a decline, A, I'm not betting on it, and B, I still think he's a great player. So Pro Bowl top 10, no problem for me.
Yeah, all pro is tough because I think the reputations that TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, and Max Crosby have around the league, all four of those guys have been consistently putting up close to 100 pressures. And Nick Bosa, I forgot about Nick Bosa. Those five, I would say, are ahead of Khalil Mack in terms of their reputations around the league and their production over the past few seasons. Khalil, he was solid in 2022. I would say above solid. Like if this were heading into last season, I think we probably would have put him in the B tier, just based off of like what he was in 2022. In 2023, it's a completely different conversation. I think, it's just kind of insane to me to still look at these numbers. So out of qualified edge rushers, he was 9th in pass rush grade. He was 7th in total pressures with 88. He was 6th in pass rush productivity. He was 7th in pass rush win rate. If you combine sacks and quarterback hits, he was 8th with 29. TJ Watt was some absurd number, like 38, which is crazy. Run stops, he was 3rd. Run stop percentage, he was 5th. He was so productive last year. And I think that merits a Pro Bowl tag right now. I do wonder, are those numbers able to be replicated in 2024? I have a small amount of doubt there because I do think he is going to be playing less snaps. Like we have 2 other edge rushers on this team who are right behind him. So I do think he is going to be playing less snaps. I think the total number of stats for him goes down. But I still think this is a guy with last season's team merited Pro Bowl conversations. This year, with a more competitive football team around him, I do expect him to still be a Pro Bowl edge rusher. And I hope Chargers fans are very, very ready to vote for him to get to that point.
Yeah, man. Just a ton of fun to watch last year. I'm sure he'll be good this year. So, yeah, Mack, great player. Their best player last year.
Yeah.
Outside of maybe Keenan, but either way, Mack took the health crown. So,
yeah. I would comfortably say Mack was the best player last year. Even, like I said, I was watching the end of the season for Thule mostly. Khalil, man, even at the end of the season where, the coach is fired, the season's gone to hell, 63 to whatever game. Khalil against the Bills was just a wrecking ball, man. Like that was maybe one of his best games of the season. And it was very much a lost game. Like the season's over. And he's just like, nah, man, like I'm just going to pull us out of this mess and we're going to maybe go beat the Bills. Like it was literally like Khalil and Thule just dragging that team to being competitive. And as Forgotten Low, he did not check out. I respect him so much for how he ended the season because we've all seen veteran Chargers players in a lost season check out. And it's a very rare type of leader, Phillip Rivers, Khalil Mack type of person, Keenan Allen, to say, hey, you know what? We might be 3-9 right now. I don't give a shit. Like, let's go. Like, we're going to be competitive in this game. And honestly, like, almost single-handedly won that game for them. It was just so impressive to me. I respect him so much. Fighting through the injuries, fighting through firing a coach, fighting through this and that. being the leader, taking Quentin Johnson under his wing last season. It didn't necessarily pan out to a great rookie season, but he doesn't have to go take the first round receiver and say, hey man, like you're having a tough time, but like, let's go. Like you come hang out with me. I'll teach you the ropes. Like not many defensive players are doing that. So I respect him so much. His play, everything he gives the team off the field, taking the pay cut to stay with the team. I love Khalil Mack, and I think there's no other way for him to be ranked otherwise on this team right now.
Yeah, I wish we had him for longer. I wish we had him for the years prior and for many years to come, because he really just feels, he just feels like the player that you would have fallen in love with, like watching football when you were younger. Like, oh my gosh, that player. If he were with the Chargers for a very long time and had a decade with them, like he's kind of quote unquote this generation's like junior Seau kind of type. Just the way that he plays, the maturity. It's unfortunate that he, might only have one more year with the Chargers.
Yeah.
But no one's really won me over that fast like Khalil Mack. We were obviously excited for the trade. We know what kind of player he was.
Yeah.
But the leadership and the maturity and the old school nature, it just wows me every day. He's one of my favorite players.
Yeah, man. It's a real bummer we didn't get to see Corey Linsley and Khalil Mack play more meaningful football games for the Chargers. Really, really is a bummer.
Yeah. Okay. Down to the safeties.
All right. Safety conversation. We did a bold prediction episode a few weeks ago, and I predicted that Alohi Gilman would be in the Pro Bowl. So I feel like, as a bold prediction, I feel like he has to be in the B category, and that might surprise some people, but I think this guy is definitely ready to take another step forward next season. He was, consistently ranked and graded very, very highly last season. He actually had better statistics on PFF than Derwin James did last season by quite a bit.
A lot.
So I think the turnovers, the leadership, I'm putting Alohi Gilman in the B category, and I think he's ready to take that step.
I agree, and I wouldn't even knock you for putting him in the A category if you wanted to. I don't know how many. Justin Simmons was one of the All-Pros last year, and he's not even on a team right now. Not mistaken. So I'm curious, I have no idea what's going to happen there. So there's a certain aspect of, like, you look at like Jesse Bates' numbers, and I can't remember the other safety's name. Winfield, these guys, their numbers, it's very much so lots of interceptions, lots of forced fumbles. Alohi does that. He's very close to having that. He's the other safety, late day 3 pick on what has been a bad defense. Alohi was so good, he was good on Staley's defense, which basically didn't apply to many players, and as a defensive back, no less.
Yeah.
So it was. What he's been doing is pretty impressive. I think if he's in the B category as solid starter with upside, which ranks about 11 to 16 for safeties, he's like 11th. I genuinely believe that he's the first B plus tier that we really should have. I believe in him quite a bit, so I'm comfortable having him there, which also does kind of help with my Derwin James categorization.
Yeah, I think last thing on Alohi, I think it says a lot about him and his play that this new regime was so very intent on re-signing him and bringing him back and keeping him around. And players like him, we've seen in the past, are not even like kept on the team by the regime that took them. Like, it's very similar to like the Drew Tranquil conversation. We were kind of bracing ourselves for him to leave. Instead, this regime recognized that he's a fantastic safety. Jim Harbaugh has gone out and said that he feels like they have the best safety duo in the league. That might be a bit of a stretch, but they're in the conversation because of Alohi Gilman. So I think B is at minimum where he is. I didn't look a ton at who the other like great safeties are, but Pro Bowl is probably tough for him, but I think Chargers fans should definitely go out and vote for him this season.
Yeah.
The Derwin conversation. So I went down and separated his numbers from pre-Staley firing and post-Staley firing.
Yep.
And it's honestly kind of funny, like how much his coverage grades and statistics improved after Staley got fired. So his coverage grade, it was only 3 games, but his coverage grade increased by 10 full points. His forced incompletion percentage tripled. His yards per reception decreased by 3 yards. Like, this guy, without telling us, told us that he hated playing in Brandon Staley's defense last season. So I know people are kind of down on him. There's been a lot of washed tags around Derwin James. I still believe that Pro Bowl safety Derwin James is around. I still believe that Jesse Minter will be able to maximize him, get him around the football more often. And as he kind of broke it down, they'll move him around, but it's going to be matchup dependent. It's not going to be, hey, Derwin, you're going to play 8 positions every single game, and you're going to be an edge rusher on this play, cover tight end on this play deep safety. It's just going to be one game. You're going to do this one thing. And I think that's the right approach. So I still believe that Derwin is a Pro Bowl level talent. If Staley were still around, maybe this is a different kind of conversation. But I do really believe that this defense is perfect for Derwin James. I think he's ready to get back to his Pro Bowl level self. So even though the numbers don't necessarily quantify him as a Pro Bowl safety, I think this is purely like talent meets scheme meets right coach. So I'm betting that he gets back to his Pro Bowl level.
Yeah, I agree. So the debate really for me was, do I think he ascends to the all pro level again, or is he Pro Bowl? I didn't really consider him a solid starter with upside. I do think things will be better. So I'm perfectly happy putting him in the Pro Bowl category. I don't think they're kind of like linebacker. Not a ton of new great safeties either, certainly at least in the last couple of drafts. So I think I'm perfectly fine placing him in Pro Bowl. If he makes all pro, awesome. Again, Justin Simmons is not even on a roster. So, and people, I'm very curious because you talked about Jeremy Fowler's article. I'm very curious where they'll have Derwin this year. Do you remember where Derwin was last year?
No, but I think I could.
Made the top 10. Probably was no. That might have been Herbert ranked higher.
So Derwin was second.
Really?
He was second, yes. In 2022, he was fourth. So that this past season, his highest ranking was 1. His lowest ranking was 8. Average ranking was second. The main blurb was that he was healthy. Like, people think that he that was the key thing of him not being that high. So heading into last season, the top 10 safeties, I'll just say this was Micah Fitzpatrick, Derwin, Justin Simmons, Budda Baker, Javon Holland, Jesse Bates, Kevin Byard, who got traded last year, and I think is not even starting for a current team. Anyways, CJ Gardner-Johnson, Talanoa Hufanga, Antoine Winfield, and then the honorable mentions were Marcus Williams, Quandre Diggs, who's also a free agent, Kyle Duggar, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, who's also a free agent, Xavier McKinney, Jalen Petre, and then the receiving votes were Tyrann Mathieu, Eddie Jackson, also a free agent, Jeremy Chin, Jaron Kearse, also a free agent, and Justin Reed.
I do not remember him being second. I'll tell you that. I would have lost that bet. Yeah. So there's definitely a league-wide respect for him. If you, again, gun to my head sort of thing, or anybody's head, if you said name 3 of the best safeties, Derwin probably comes up because of the weight that he carries and the name that pops up. Whether that's actually true or not, it's not true statistically, but there's certain, a weight that his name carries. So he could be an All-Pro this year. And you just looked at, the list. There's clearly some turnover and change year over year based on projections at safety. So
I'll say this before you finish, maybe. Last year, the Pro Bowl safeties were Kyle Hamilton, Budda Baker, Julian Love, who wasn't on the ESPN list, Jesse Bates, Justin Simmons, and Minka Fitzpatrick.
Yeah, so he has to. I feel like Hamilton.
He's not beating out Kyle Hamilton for.
No, not Hamilton. Probably not Fitzpatrick. We'll see.
Yeah, I think those 2 are comfortably the best 2, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then we'll see with Bates. Flirts with top 5, top 6, but that's not enough to put him in the All-Pro category.
Yeah, the All-Pros were Hamilton and Jesse Bates, first team, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
Second team was Simmons and Buda Baker, looks like.
Jesse Bates, the guy that Alohi Gilman mossed in the end zone way back when.
Way back when. So I think basing last season off of this conversation, I think it's tough for me to put Derwin in the all-pro category.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it is possible that he gets back to that point. Like, I don't think there's second. It was probably second team all pro, but I think that's in the cards. I would just say, coming off of last season, I think it would be a disservice to this exercise putting him higher than this, because putting him in the Pro Bowl category is really just a bet on who he is as a talent and this coaching staff to get him right, because his play last season did not merit anything higher than that, in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. This is a bet on rebounding. I know we just did this with Staley. Like, oh, now we have a guy who's going to use him correctly. And then it turns out Gus Bradley was the one who used him correctly. I don't think it'll get worse. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic here.
Yeah. Man, good old Gus Bradley. What I would have given for Gus Bradley defense with the Kellen Moore, Joe Lombardi offense would have been fun.
Yeah, interesting. That would have been something.
Yeah. So it's funny. It's kind of the inverse of the offense here, or very similar to the offense, where we had a few solid starter with upside. You know, offense has the two S tier categories players with Herbert and Slater. Defense has Mack and Derwin as Pro Bowl category. But it's interesting. Like, I think if you were to go through and rank, like ask every Chargers fans to rank their top 10 players, I wonder how many put more defense players than offense players in the top 10.
Okay, so they put Herbert first. They'd probably say Slater. Someone would say Derwin. So okay, who would make the top 10? Derwin, Mack.
I think unquestionably the top 4 is Herbert, Slater, Mack, Derwin in some order.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think you would probably have Joey and Thule in there. I think most people would probably put Alohi in there. Maybe. I don't know. It's just interesting because, like, we're so used to the offense being the carrier of the team.
Right.
And I do think the offense is going to be better than the defense. But I think the defense has more, like, reliable starting players in a weird way.
The defense been reliable starting players. Is that including the average starter category?
Yeah. I don't know. I'm misremembering.
Maybe. No, I truly believe enough in this offensive line and their philosophy that they're going to get at least 3 out of that group.
Yeah.
If not even 4, maybe even 5. Because we had all 5 average starter or better. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I see what you mean, though. I do see what you mean. The edge group certainly helps on defense.
Yeah. All right. Good conversation today. You know, Shulaman Dicker is in the top 10. Stop playing. Yes.
Dicker, S tier. Josh Harris, I guess S tier. I don't know how to evaluate that.
I mean, he's been to the Pro Bowl recently.
He has.
But there's no way for me to look at stats and be like, long snapper.
He hasn't messed up, so he's perfect.
Yeah.
Ryan Ficken, S tier coach.
But yeah, Cameron Dicker is better at his job than all but 5 players on the team.
Yeah, I did
unequivocally better than 5.
Yeah, I did a top 10 players for the next 3 years, and I think Dicker was 6th or 7th on my list.
Yeah.
At some point, if you're Justin Tucker, you're Justin Tucker. Yep. And remember we had that Justin Tucker trade for Mike Williams conversation?
Yeah.
Would we still have done that, knowing what we know now?
Yeah. All right, guys. That's been a great episode. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We had a change of plans. We are not going to be able to record on Thursday, so we're not going to be back here until Monday. but we are inching closer and closer towards training camp. So we appreciate the support, all of the comments. That's going to do it for us today. We'll see you next Monday. As always, this has been the Guilty as Charged podcast, and bolt up.